He held his head tightly, his hands gripped his hair, but he couldn't chase away the emptiness, spreading through his entire body. In front of him was his phone screen, the light from the screen reflected on his pale face. In the dark room, the number in his bank account had almost vanished. He blinked. He looked at it one more time. Impossible. That was all the money he had left. After so many years of crazy, relentless studying, after 2 university degrees with honors, after years of dedicating himself to multinational corporations, with a salary that millions of people out there are craving for. After countless times he believed he was smart enough, brave and interred to build an empire of his own. Now, there was nothing left. The room sank into a suffocating silence. Only the low hum of the ventilation fan could be heard. He sat motionless, like a statue drained of its soul. One question kept repeating in his mind, throbbing in his temples with every beat. Why? Why could someone like him lose everything? He wasn't a lazy person. He didn't lack knowledge. He used to make a lot of money with his own hands. He used to manage a complex system of work. He stayed awake for nights to research the market. He read hundreds of financial documents. He sat at the same table with the most successful people in the industry. So why, after all of that, did he return to the starting line? Or rather, to almost zero? But what he didn't know, right at this darkest moment, was that the answer to his failure did not lie in the market. It did not lie in the fluctuations of real estate. It did not lie in the cruelty of the tech industry. And it absolutely did not lie in the virtual coins he just lost tonight. The answer lay in a place that a smart person like him never thought of. It lay deep inside himself. And to truly understand that bitter truth, he would have to face a person whom, at first, he completely distrusted. A secluded Zen master, living in a small wooden house high up on a mountain. But before that fateful meeting happens, we need to turn back the pages of the past. Back to a few years ago, when everything in his life was still very different. His name is Daniel. Ever since he was a child, Daniel was draped in the cloak of high expectations. Everyone considered him a prodigy. He learned extremely fast. He remembered things for an astonishingly long time, and his problem-solving skills were always far beyond his peers. At school, Daniel's name was always at the top of the rankings. While his friends scratched their heads, spending hours just to understand a physics concept or a math equation, Daniel usually just needed a few minutes to glance over it. That superiority gradually formed an ironclad belief in him. He believed that intelligence was the golden ticket of his life. If I am smart enough, I will definitely be successful. If I load enough knowledge, I will easily make money. If I work harder than the rest of the world, I will become incredibly wealthy. And for a very long time, that belief seemed flawless. It worked perfectly. Daniel entered a prestigious university. Not stopping there, he conquered another advanced academic program. The day he left campus, he held 2 degrees with excellent academic records. Immediately, a multinational corporation rolled out the red carpet to hire him, a sky-high starting salary, an office on the 40th floor, looking down at the bustling city, intercontinental business class trips, strategic meetings with powerful people from various countries. Daniel took a deep breath and felt his life running on a perfect track. At the end of every month, a massive number was transferred to his bank account, and every month, thanks to his discipline, he took a large portion to put into his savings account. He watched those numbers grow bigger every day and told himself, "This is it. This is the secret formula people use to get rich. Study hard, get a prestigious job, earn a high salary, save strictly, then invest that money." A formula that seemed impossible to fail, a straight line leading directly to financial freedom. But there was an invisible puzzle piece that Daniel completely missed. He was too busy building wealth on the outside. But he forgot to build a person with enough inner strength to keep and grow that wealth. The difference between these two things is so thin that people often don't notice it when everything is going smoothly. But years later, that tiny crack would tear his whole life apart. One weekend evening, Daniel sat sipping a glass of wine in his luxury apartment. He opened his banking app, looking at his savings account. He had accumulated a fairly large amount of capital, an amount enough for many people to retire early. A thought began to spark, and quickly flared up in his mind. Why should I continue working as an employee? To make someone else rich? He craved absolute freedom. He wanted to build an empire of his own. He wanted to be the boss, the final decision maker. And so, with extreme confidence, Daniel handed in his resignation letter. The first day he woke up, after officially leaving the company, the air around him felt incredibly light. It was wonderful. No more bosses to report to, no more useless hours-long meetings, no more asking for permission to do what he wanted. He had money in his hands. He had a head full of strategic knowledge. He had management experience from a world-leading corporation. And most importantly, he absolutely believed that he understood the rules of the business game. Daniel decided to fire his first shot into the tech industry. He saw a gap in an explosively growing market. He dived into product research with intense focus. He found partners. He hired a talented team of employees. He poured a large portion of his savings into the project. The first few months passed, exactly as drawn on his business plan. Revenue started to appear and grow. Daniel felt he was right. His intelligence was proven once again. At a party, he confidently told an old friend, "Everything is within my calculations. I know exactly what I am doing." But he forgot a harsh rule. The market doesn't care how smart Daniel is. The market is a living entity, constantly changing, and full of unpredictable variables. And then, the first cracks began to show. A few wrong strategic decisions were made in moments of overconfidence. A key partner suddenly backed out and broke their commitment. Operating costs skyrocketed out of control. Suddenly, customer behavior changed. They were no longer interested in his solution. A product feature that Daniel was certain would explode in sales was met with cold indifference by the market. Money began flowing out of the company, much faster than it was flowing in. Daniel panicked. He rushed to salvage the situation. He worked day and night, barely sleeping. He decided to inject more of his personal savings into the company to keep the blood flowing. He convinced himself, just try a little harder, get through this phase, and everything will explode. But sometimes, blind effort cannot straighten a path that is fundamentally wrong from the roots. Eventually, the cash flow dried up. The company doors had to close. Daniel lost a huge chunk of the capital he had saved for years. His pride took a heavy blow, but he refused to surrender. He comforted himself. It's okay. This is just tuition fees. The most successful people have all failed at least once. And he decided to stand up and try again. This time, he chose real estate. He believed that, unlike the risky, invisible tech world, real estate was where real money lived. He started researching furiously. He went to see dozens of different locations. He used his data analysis skills to dissect pricing histories. He met with the toughest brokers. He hunted for investment opportunities that the crowd accidentally ignored. With more caution than before, he put his money down. And history seemed to repeat its initial script. For a while, things looked very bright. A few properties he bought started to increase in value on paper. Daniel breathed a sigh of relief. His proud confidence began to return. He thought he had found a new formula, safer and more certain. But then a macroeconomic shock hit. The financial market suddenly changed its policies. Interest rates skyrocketed. One of his major deals suddenly got tangled in legal issues. Another property, despite a price cut, could not find a buyer. His cash flow was completely frozen. The leverage loans that were initially used to optimize profits now turned into a noose tightening around his neck every day. The pressure of paying interest weighed heavily on his shoulders. Finally, when he could no longer bear the burden, Daniel was forced to bite the bullet and sell off his assets. In the worst market conditions, once again, his money evaporated. But this failure brought a much deeper pain than the last. It wasn't just the pain of losing money, it was the collapse of his belief. He sat in his apartment, looking out at the night sky, and began to doubt himself. Maybe I'm not as good at business as I mistakenly thought. The confidence of the former prodigy was shattering. His massive wealth was now just a tiny fraction of what it used to be. But just when despair was eating away at him, a new, flashy, and tempting idea flashed in his mind. Crypto. Daniel started reading countless media stories about ordinary people who, overnight, turned a tiny drop of money into a massive fortune. He dove back into the screens. He looked at technical charts. He read in-depth analyses. He tracked the news every second, every minute. He told himself, I have learned my lesson from tech. I have learned my lesson from real estate. This time, I will be extremely disciplined and careful. But there was a truth happening in his mind that he deliberately ignored. Deep down, Daniel was no longer truly investing because he saw value or opportunity. He was entering this game with one single desire: to get back what he had lost. That is a fatal difference. When a person enters the market to make money, they still have the clarity to analyze and think. But when they rush into the market just to win back the money they lost, emotion immediately snatches the steering wheel and starts making every decision instead of logic. Daniel made a crazy decision. He put all of his remaining money into a trading coin that he believed would skyrocket. For the first few days, the price actually went up. His account was glowing green. He looked at the profit numbers dancing on the screen and breathed a sigh of relief. See? He smiled to himself. I can still do this. I am about to return to my golden age. But the joy was short-lived. The financial market has no room for mercy. A bad piece of news was released. The market reversed violently. The price started to freefall. Logic told him to cut his losses immediately, but emotion screamed, no! Daniel didn't sell. He clung to a fragile hope. He waited. The price continued to break through support levels. He kept waiting. His hands trembled as he swiped the screen. It will have to recover soon. It's just a technical correction. But it never recovered. The number on the screen just kept free-falling, dropping and dropping, until that fateful night. That number almost completely evaporated, leaving only a few pennies. Not even enough to buy a decent meal. That was exactly the moment. Daniel collapsed, holding his head tightly in the silent room. No more tech company, no more expensive real estate, no more massive savings, and most painfully, no more sense of certainty about himself. He used to hold all the weapons that this world said would help a person win. 2 prestigious university degrees, top-tier work experience, a starting salary everyone dreamed of, sharp analytical knowledge, high-quality relationships, and abundant capital. So why? Why did he still end up in a tragic defeat? That night, Daniel stayed awake. The next morning, before the first rays of sunlight could hit the city, he packed a few clothes and left. He didn't know where he was going. He just wanted to run away. Away from the skyscrapers, away from the green and red charts, away from his own failure. On the bus, leaving the city, he suddenly remembered the words of an old friend. That friend once told him about a hidden Zen master, living a simple life in a wooden house, on top of a misty mountain. Daniel remembered his friend's words vividly. If one day you are pushed into a corner, and you no longer know where the real problem lies, go find him. At the time he heard those words, Daniel was at the peak of his career. He just laughed it off and considered it an entertaining story. But now, with his hands completely empty, he didn't find anything funny anymore. 2 days later, after a long and exhausting journey, Daniel stood in front of a tiny wooden house, swallowed by the silent nature. An old man with a gentle face was slowly drinking tea on the wooden porch. He wasn't surprised to see a stranger appear. He didn't ask how many millions of dollars Daniel used to make. He didn't even bother asking how many times he had gone bankrupt. He just quietly looked into Daniel's bloodshot, tired eyes. Then he spoke, in a voice deep and light as a passing breeze. "You traveled all the way up here just to find money?" Daniel froze. He stood in silence for a long time. The wind whistled through the pine leaves. After a few seconds of holding back, he softly replied, "No, sir." The Zen master smiled faintly, pouring another stream of hot water into the teapot. "Then if you are not looking for money, what did you come here to find?" Daniel looked down at his dusty shoes. I want to know why I failed so miserably." The Zen master motioned for him to sit on the wooden chair opposite him, pushing a cup of steaming hot tea toward him. "How much did you lose?" Daniel hesitated, then stated a number big enough to buy a few houses in the city. The Zen master just nodded, his expression unchanged. "So besides that money, what else do you think you lost?" Daniel snapped his head up, his eyes full of helplessness. "It's the money, all of my money. I lost everything." "Just money?" Daniel pursed his lips, not answering. He didn't understand the old man's point. The Zen master slowly took a sip of tea, then set the cup down. "From what I see, you didn't just lose money once." Daniel frowned, feeling a wall of defense rising in his chest. "What do you mean?" "Do you know my story?" The Zen master smiled. "Your tech company collapsed." Daniel reluctantly nodded. "Your real estate investments shattered." He nodded again, the bridge of his nose stinging. "And then the virtual coins abandoned you too." "Yes," he replied in a tiny voice. The Zen master looked straight into his eyes, a piercing gaze. "But you are sitting here, and you still firmly believe that those 3 stories of failure came from 3 completely different causes, right?" Daniel blinked. The old man's words were like a needle hitting his thoughts. "Isn't that the case, master? The first time was because of partners and market changes. The second time was because of macro policies. The third time was because I didn't cut my losses in time." "They are completely different." "No." A short, simple answer, but it carried an invisible weight. Daniel felt extremely annoyed. The pride of an intellectual was being challenged. Then, if not because of those things, what is the real cause? The Zen master didn't answer directly. He lifted the teapot and asked back. "Think back to the first day. Before you touched your first large sum of money, what seeds did you plant in the ground?" Daniel was bewildered. "Seeds? What are you talking about?" "Yes, seeds." "I really don't understand." The Zen master stood up, slowly walked to the edge of the porch, and pointed to the small garden full of fruit trees in front of the house. "Look at this garden. If you want a tree to bear fruit, what do you need?" Daniel answered like a child's reflex. "I need soil. I need water. I need sunlight. And I need seeds. So if you don't plant any seeds..." but just stand with your hands clasped in front of an empty patch of dirt, screaming every day, "I want fruit, give me fruit." What will happen? Daniel couldn't help but let out a short, dry laugh. Then, no miracle will happen. Dirt is still just dirt. Exactly. The Zen master turned around, staring at him. Money in your life operates in the exact same way. The smile on Daniel's lips suddenly vanished. The porch sank back into silence. The Zen master stepped closer, his voice becoming more stern. You spent half your life learning how to harvest. You learned how to count money. But you never truly learned how to plant the seeds to create that cash flow. Daniel felt a fierce resistance rising up. You are wrong. I worked extremely hard. I stayed up until 3 a.m. every day. I know you are hardworking. I used my intellect to help that corporation bring in millions of dollars in revenue. I know you are very smart. I lived a disciplined life. I saved every penny. I didn't spend wastefully. I know you are very careful. I also took the trouble to invest, so my money could make more money. I know all of that. Daniel almost shouted, Then where did I go wrong? Why did I have to suffer this outcome? The Zen master waited for Daniel's anger to settle. He asked, very softly, During all those years, you exhausted yourself, trying to make as much money as possible. Did you do anything to make other people's lives better and more valuable? That question was like a bucket of freezing water, thrown straight into Daniel's face. All the excuses he was about to say suddenly got stuck in his throat. He stood frozen. His mind began to fast forward through the past years. In the company. True, he used to help his colleagues, but that was because the boss asked, or to meet the department's KPIs. He used to execute projects that brought huge profits, but the only motivation in his head at that time was, how much will my bonus be at the end of this year? When he opened his own company, he served customers. But every time he saw a customer walk in, a calculation automatically popped into his head. How much profit will this person leave for me? The Zen master saw right through his confusion and said, You always start everything with the question, what will I get out of this? But very rarely, or perhaps never, did you stop to ask yourself, what real value am I creating for the people around me? Daniel blinked continuously. A dim light began to flicker in the fog of his mind. This is where the whole story of his life began to turn. But, Master, what does that have to do with me losing my money? The Zen master shook his head. Money is not some natural magic born out of thin air. Money, in essence, is just the material result of a process of exchanging value between humans. Daniel still tried to cling to his old logic. But I did create value. I sold tech products. I provided housing services. That is value. Yes, you did. But only on the surface. Then why did I still collapse? The Zen master smiled an understanding smile. Because a seed cannot just be planted once and then be expected to feed you for the rest of your life. Daniel looked up. The Zen master spoke slowly, emphasizing every word. Your problem is, you were too impatient to get the fruit. You figured out how to make money. You found ways to hold on to it tightly. You used money as bait to catch more money. But you forgot to build a fertile piece of land. You forgot to continuously plant new seeds, to keep that stream of value alive. You were eating away at your own tree. Daniel began to vaguely understand the core of the issue, but curiosity still pushed him forward. Then, Master, after all, these financial seeds you speak of, what do they look like? The Zen master didn't answer immediately. He waved for Daniel to follow him, down the small stone steps, leading deep into the garden. This garden had all kinds of trees. There were massive ancient trees. with roots digging deep into the earth. There were trees heavy with ripe, juicy fruit. And there were also tiny sprouts, just pushing a few green leaves above the soil. He pointed to an ancient tree bearing fruit. "This tree, I planted the seed and cared for it 10 years ago." Then he stepped aside, pointing to a tiny sprout that had just popped out of the ground. "And this sprout, I just buried the seed last month. You see, you cannot stand in front of this tiny sprout today and angrily yell at it, asking why it refuses to produce sweet fruit for you to eat." Daniel quietly swallowed. "But I didn't lack patience. I worked tirelessly for years." The Zen master turned to look at him. "Working hard does not mean you are planting seeds. You can be busy from morning till night, just to serve your own greed and ego. Or you can work from morning till night with a mindset of creating a positive change for others." On the outside, both of those people are sweating and extremely busy, but in reality, they are planting two completely different types of seeds into the soil of their lives. And naturally, the fruit they harvest will be worlds apart. Standing in the middle of the silent garden, Daniel began to look back at the entire picture of his life. A chilling sensation ran down his spine. He realized a terrifying truth that he had been covering up with pride for so long. He had always believed that the secret to success was to be smarter, sharper, and to win against everyone else. But maybe true success and wealth, in a sustainable way, comes from how many other people you help become better. The Zen master's voice echoed again, pulling him back to reality. If you want to rebuild your financial foundation now, throw away your old way of thinking. Don't start every day with the question, "How can I make a lot of money today?" Instead, ask yourself, "Today, how can I use my abilities to solve someone's pain, to create value for someone?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "But right now, I am just a man with empty hands. I have no capital. What do I use to create value?" "You have no money, but you still have time." "What else?" "You have tech skills. You have an analytical mind. But that's not enough to do business?" "You have your health." "And what else?" The Zen master nodded slightly. "And you have kindness." Daniel frowned, feeling this was so unrealistic. Kindness? How can kindness be converted into cash to pay the bills? Not all kindness instantly produces money, the Zen master explained gently. But remember this, a person who constantly creates real value, a person who always keeps their promises even when taking a loss, a person who treats people fairly, helps partners grow, and builds deep trust. That person is constantly planting invisible seeds. And financial wealth will eventually just be one of the many sweet fruits that those seeds bring. At this moment, a massive wall in Daniel's mind completely crumbled. He had always wanted money to appear first, like a form of recognition. After having money, he would then think about using it to create something. But he had gone against the laws of nature. The right order must be value first, money follows. But the Zen master's lesson didn't stop there. He asked one last question. "Now, answer me. Do you know the real reason why you failed so miserably in all 3 of your startups?" Daniel took a deep breath, thinking carefully. "Because I made wrong decisions? Not enough. Because the market suddenly reversed unpredictably? Still not enough. Because I was too arrogant and overconfident in my intelligence?" The Zen master smiled, getting closer to the truth. "Then what is the truth, master?" He looked straight at him, speaking every word clearly. "Because you always wanted to pick the sweet fruit of a rich man. Long before you actually trained yourself to become a person with the inner foundation of wealth." Daniel was stunned into silence. He couldn't argue back because it was too true. He remembered the early days of opening his first company. He wanted revenue to explode immediately. He wanted to prove to the whole world that his decision to quit his job was genius. When he lost money, he wanted to jump into riskier deals to quickly get his capital back. He always wanted instant results. He looked down on starting with small steps. He hated waiting. He skipped building the foundation. In short, he only craved eating the fruit, but he threw away the responsibility of caring for the tree. The Zen master patted his shoulder lightly. You don't need to, and you cannot turn into a completely different person overnight. Then where must I start now? Start planting seeds. But how? Tomorrow, when you go down the mountain, find someone who is struggling. Use what you know to help them solve that problem. And absolutely do not ask how much they will pay you. Daniel was utterly surprised. Just that simple? No. Then what do I have to do the next day? Keep doing it again. And after that, keep doing it. Daniel was confused. But how long do I have to do this for? The Zen master smiled, a gentle but powerful smile. Until you no longer see helping and creating value for others, just as a disguised strategy to make money. Daniel returned to the city. This time, there were no grand celebration parties, no Class A luxury office waiting for him, no million-dollar venture capital funds, not even subordinates calling him boss. He started over from scratch, using exactly what was left inside him. That was his logical thinking about tech, his expensive business experiences, his sharp analytical ability, and above all, the countless bleeding lessons from his past arrogance. He actively sought out small shops and local businesses, places he once thought were too small for a former corporate manager like him to care about. He offered to help a grocery store owner on the verge of bankruptcy, reorganize their inventory management system, which was eating away their profits. He stayed up nights manually designing and coding a sales website. For an old friend struggling with a family carpentry shop, he patiently sat for hours analyzing cash flows to show a small coffee shop how to cut the invisible costs killing them. Many of those jobs he did completely for free or only accepted a symbolic fee. But gradually, Daniel began to notice a miraculous shift. The people he helped began giving him a deep sense of trust. The grocery store owner introduced him to a relative who needed consulting to open a convenience store chain. The old friend's carpentry shop thrived and came back to sign a long-term system maintenance contract with him. A tiny opportunity appeared. Then it paved the way for another, bigger opportunity. Customers came to him on their own, through words of mouth filled with appreciation. Daniel didn't suddenly become a millionaire overnight. No cinematic miracle happened, nor did an unexpected inheritance or capital stream drop on his head. It was a slow, exhausting, and challenging process. There were nights he still struggled with living expenses. There were times old doubts wanted to rise again. But for the first time in his life, Daniel felt a solid sense of peace. He knew for sure he was building something incredibly sustainable. He was diligently planting seeds. And finally, the first seeds taking deep root in the soil began to push their sprouts above the grass. 1 year after leaving the mountain peak, Daniel had built a small-scale consulting business. 2 years later, it grew into a company with a solid position in the region. But the biggest difference wasn't in the size of the company. It was in his mind. Every morning he woke up, he no longer calculated, "What trick will I use today to maximize profits?" He asked his team, "Today, how can our solution bring more practical value to this customer?" And that was when a fascinating paradox of life appeared. When he stopped hunting for money at all costs, money started flowing toward him as a natural result. It was no longer an obsessive goal, but just an inevitable reward for the value he had given away. Daniel later continued to invest, but he was a different person. He no longer bet his entire financial life on a single market fluctuation. He learned how to bow his head to manage risks. He learned how to appreciate and protect every penny of capital. He knew how to create resilient cash flows. He patiently built a loyal team. And most importantly, most crucially, he never again used financial investment decisions to try and bandage or heal his psychological wounds or past failures. That was the most expensive lesson the Zen master had gifted him. Because in life, we often have the illusion that we are investing to get rich, but deep down inside, we are actually just running away in panic, running away from the feeling of inferiority when seeing others succeed, running away from the terrifying fear that we are not actually as good as we thought, and running away from the toxic desire to prove to the whole world that I am still a winner. Daniel used to blame the market for stealing his money, but now he understood that long before he lost his money, he had lost an asset even more valuable than that. That was honesty with his own ego. He used to boastfully view his 2 degrees as a guarantee of wealth, view his corporate experience as an invincible shield, view his natural intelligence as a money-printing machine. Yes, no one denies those are wonderful advantages, but by themselves, they can never guarantee a peaceful and solid financial foundation because abundant knowledge only helps you know more than others. Extensive experience only helps you perform tasks more smoothly. But how you define value, how you control your greed, how you treat the people around you with kindness, and how you conquer your own inner fears. That is the only power that determines what you can build and keep for a long time in this life. Most of us crave a prosperous, abundant life, but the tragedy is we only fix our eyes on the sweet fruits of others. We crave the supercar they drive. We marvel at the mansion they live in. We are jealous of their bank account balance with many zeros. And we crazily ask, what trick can I use to quickly own those things? But perhaps, after hearing Daniel's story, the deeper question we need to ask ourselves every morning when we look in the mirror is, today, what kinds of seeds am I planting into the soil of my life? Who are you truly helping? What pain in society are you solving? What relationships are you nurturing with sincerity? Are you using your money to feed greed or to create value? And above all else, through the work you do every day, what kind of person are you training yourself to become? Because the rule is harsh. If you use tricks to grab a lot of money, but refuse to upgrade your inner character foundation, then yes, you might rise very fast. But then you will also collapse just as quickly and painfully. Daniel used to sit in the dark, holding his head, thinking his life was over when he lost everything. But years later, looking back, he smiled, realizing the very day his bank account was nothing but a round zero was actually his most glorious day. That was the day he truly started laying the first bricks for genuine wealth. A wealth not measured by numbers dancing on an electronic screen, but a wealth crystallized from the ability to create irreplaceable value, from the ability to calmly stand up, brush off the dirt after a devastating fall, from the humility to learn again from scratch like a child, from the tolerance to be willing to give before selfishly demanding to receive, and from absolute freedom in his soul when he could peacefully restart everything without needing to prove his greatness to anyone in this world. Those are the financial seeds. And remember, seeds always need time. You cannot be crazy enough to plant a seed in the ground tonight and then early tomorrow morning dig up the dirt just to check how many centimeters its roots have grown. You have to diligently water it every day, protect it from pests, shield it from storms, wait patiently, And above all, keep planting new seeds. Maybe today, when you look around, you still haven't seen any sweet fruit appear. But silence above the ground does not mean there isn't a magnificent process quietly happening beneath the surface. If Daniel's story today makes a corner of your heart slightly tremble, making you stop to reflect on the decisions in your own life, then starting tomorrow, carry only one question with you. What seeds am I planting for my own future? Because sometimes the center of the tragedy is not that we are born without enough money, but the core issue is that we haven't trained and built enough inner strength to create value so that money automatically finds us and stays with us. That was the expensive price Daniel had to pay, losing almost all his assets to realize. But he didn't need a time machine to go back and fix the past. He just needed to stand up, grab a hoe, and start planting different seeds. Starting today, day by day, unhurriedly, with every single act of kindness, helping every single person, giving away every single real value, so that, in some future spring, the trees will quietly grow tall. They will take different shapes, they will bear different sweet fruits, but all that abundance originates from the smallest and quietest act, planting a seed. If this story helps you look at money, the definition of success, and yourself from a deeper perspective, please support Slow English Zone by hitting like and subscribe. And especially if you are on a journey to improve your English, I highly recommend you listen to this story one more time. But this time, don't try to translate every word in your head. Just close your eyes, relax, and listen. Let profoundly humane stories like this not only help you heal and reflect on life, but also help you get used to the most natural way. Native speakers tell stories and communicate in English. However, the story about Daniel's seeds still leaves a strange open space. If a smart man can completely collapse and lose everything, just because of the greedy seeds he accidentally sowed in the past, then can a person standing at the very bottom of the abyss truly turn his destiny around completely just by changing the seeds he sows starting today? The answer might turn every rule you've ever believed upside down. And our next story will take you to a completely opposite character, a man who owns countless, uncountable assets, but stays awake every night because he cannot find a single definition of peace. Because sometimes, the poorest person in this world is not the one with the least money in their pocket. It is the one who owns so many things, but forever does not know what they are truly looking for. We will decode that mystery together. See you in the next story of Slow English Zone.